Welcome, friends. Today's presentation is on one life, one oversoul, one source. Next week will be on the purpose and benefits of meditation. Washington, D.C. area students of pure Theosophy meet here at 4865A Cordell Avenue, Suite 230, Bethesda, Maryland, 20814, every Sunday to simply observe or make comments or otherwise participate in efforts to better understand life to be lived, and then going out to practice self-development by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. These videos are being made to reach those unable to attend our meetings. If you can attend, you are invited to come and be with us or do what you can to continue this work. Let's do our part to make this philosophy available locally as the masters of wisdom keep it alive in the world for those who find it. We meet here every Sunday at 11 a.m. Every first and third Sunday of each month after this program, we have roundtable readings and discussions. We are currently studying the Bhagavad Gita and related notes. We follow the declaration on the back of our program, which reads as follows. The policy of this lodge is independent to devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves, aesthetic and otherwise, to be better able to help and teach others. Good morning. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading is taken from the Voice of the Silence. Let's find the voice here. There it is. And now, O teacher of compassion, point thou the way to other men, Behold all those knocking for admission. Await in ignorance and darkness to see the gate of the sweet law flung open. The voice of the candidates. Shalt not thou, Master of thine own mercy, reveal the doctrine of the heart? Shalt thou refuse to lead thy servants unto the path of liberation? Quoth the teacher, the paths are two, the great perfections three. 6 are the virtues that transform the body into the tree of knowledge. Who shall approach them? Who shall first enter them? Who shall first hear the doctrine of two paths in one, the truth unveiled about the secret heart, the law which, shunning learning, teaches wisdom, reveals a tale of woe. Alas, alas, that other men should possess Alaya, be one with the great soul, and that possessing it, Alaya should so little avail them. Behold, how like the moon, reflected in the tranquil waves, Alaya is reflected by the small and by the great, is mirrored in the tiniest atoms, yet fails to reach the heart of all. Alas, that so few men should profit by the gift, the priceless boon of learning truth, the right perception of existing things, the knowledge of the non-existent. Saith the pupil, O teacher, what shall I do to reach to wisdom? O wise one, what to gain perfection? Search for the path, but, O Lanu, be of clean heart before thou startest on that journey. Before thou takest thy first step, learn to discern the real from the false, the ever-fleeting from the everlasting. Learn above all to separate head learning from soul wisdom, the eye from the heart doctrine. And now we're going to have our today's talk, which is on one source, one oversoul, one life. Many seem to limit our world to that associated with materiality. So we'll start by looking at the footnote. Here on page 281 and 282, volume 1 of the Secret Doctrine. It says that the Greek definition of matter signifies to be born and to become. The matter of the world is in its essence eternal. Before creation or becoming, it is in a passive and motionless condition. It was before being put into operation. In operation, it becomes. That is, it is mobile and progressive. Creation is thus the period of activity, which in Sanskrit is manvantara, of God, who has two modes: activity or existence, also known as evolution, and passivity of being, called pralaya, or involution. So we write over here on the board. Evolution and involution. Both modes are perfect and complete, as are the waking and sleeping states of man. Being is one which we know only through existence of the many. The ideal forms or blueprints are eternal. Subjective concepts of things subsisting in the divine mind prior to becoming, point out that occultism has always known and taught that matter is a vehicle of becoming. Becoming is a mode of activity of the uncreate deity. Having been endowed with the germs of becoming, objective matter is brought into birth. The creative force fashions it according to the ideal forms. Matter not yet engendered has no form. It becomes when it is put into operation. So everything is the product of one universal creative effort. There is nothing dead in nature. Everything is organic and living, and therefore the whole world appears to be a living organism. The world was evolved out of its ideal plan, upheld through eternity in the unconsciousness of that which is called Parabrahm. This is practically identical with the innate, eternal, and self-existing ideas of Plato, now reflected by others, a force behind phenomena, an infinite and eternal energy from which all things proceed. All the Christian Kabbalists understood well the Eastern root idea. The active power, the perpetual motion of the great breath. It only awakens cosmos at the dawn of every new period, setting it into motion by means of the two contrary forces, centripetal and centrifugal. Centripetal being toward the center, and centrifugal being away from the center. These two forces are male and female, positive and negative, physical and spiritual, the two being the one primordial force. Thus causing it to become objective on the plane of illusion. We perceive as being this being real, this illusion. In other words, that dual motion transfers cosmos from the plane of the eternal ideal into that of finite manifestation, or from the noumenal to the phenomenal plane. Everything that is, was, and will be, eternally is. Even the countless forms, which are finite and perishable, only in their objective, not in their ideal form. They existed as ideals in the eternity, as no form can be given to anything, either by nature or by man, whose ideal type does not already exist, and no such form or shape can possibly enter man's consciousness or evolve in his imagination, which does not exist in prototype, at least as an approximation, and when they pass away will exist as reflections. Neither the form of man nor that of any animal, plant, or stone has ever been created, and it is only on this plane of ours, that is, objectivizing into the present materiality or expanding from within outwards. From the most sublimable and supersensuous essence into the grossest appearance. Our human forms have existed in the eternity as astral or ethereal prototypes, according to which models the spiritual beings or gods whose duty it was to bring them into objective being and terrestrial life evolved the protoplasmic forms of the future egos from their own essence. After which, when the human basic mold was ready, the natural terrestrial forces began to work on those supersensuous molds which contained, besides their own, the elements of all the past vegetable and future animal forms of this globe in them. Therefore, man's outward shell passed through every vegetable and animal body before it assumed the human state. Paracelsus explained primordial protomateria evolving out of itself the cosmos. Evolution develops from within primordial essence and manifests itself as vital activity. Vital activity is a spiritual force as invisible, incomprehensible, and indescribable power, as vital matter of which the substance of living beings consists. Within primordial matter is the matrix of all created things, the substance from which everything is formed. It is the chaos out of which the microcosm, and later on by evolution and division, each separate being comes into existence. Quote, all things and all elementary substances were contained in it in potentia, but not in actu. So it is apparent that Paracelsus anticipated the modern discovery of the potency of matter hundreds of years ago. Paracelsus laid the foundation for what the second and other stanzas of the Secret Doctrine simply refers to as Father, Mother. Father, Mother within, before it appeared in space. It is the universal matrix of cosmos, personified in the dual character of macrocosm and microcosm, the spiritual and the physical nature throughout our universe. It is a nursery out of which all creatures have grown, largely like a tree growing out of a small seed or sperm. Ancient philosophy called the earth the microcosm of the macrocosm, and man the outcome of the two. The seed out of which all beings have come, and in turn reproduces its form, possesses all the qualifications of the Great One, in the same sense as a sun has an organization similar to that of his father. In the process of dissolving, dividing, differentiating, and individualizing, the power of footnote begins to act. All production takes place in consequence of separation. There were produced the elements of fire, water, air, and earth, whose birth did not take place in a material mode or by simply separation, but by spiritual and mechanical mixture. Fire may come out of a pebble, or a tree out of a seed, although there is originally no fire in the pebble, nor a tree in the seed. Spirit is living, and life is spirit, and life and spirit, Prakriti Purusha in Sanskrit, life and spirit produce all things. But they are essentially one, and not two. The elements, too, have each one of its own body and soul. As from the seed grow the roots and their fibers, and after that the stalk with its branches and leaves, and lastly the flowers and seeds, likewise all beings were born from the elements, and consist of elementary substances out of which other forms may come into existence, bearing the characteristics of their parents. This doctrine was preached hundreds of years ago and is identical with the one that has revolutionized modern thought, and having been put into new shape and elaborated by Darwin. The elements of the mothers of all creatures are of an invisible spiritual nature and have souls, guided and informed by the spiritual beings, who are the workmen in the invisible worlds and behind the veil of occult nature. The idea of the one, the single source, evolution, and other influences lay foundation for other matters promulgated in Theosophy, like reincarnation and karma. Reincarnation is a fact under natural law and has repeatedly been documented in human scientific case studies like those of the University of Virginia's Dr. Ian Stevenson. The laws of reincarnation have to be in accordance with all other natural laws. The instinct of a single source of all manifested existence is powerful, both in the breast of scientist and philosopher, in a less intellectual form in the religionist as well. Tracing back any line of evolution leads first toward community of origin, second toward simplicity of form as opposed to growing diversity and growing complexity in the other direction. The lines of evolution projected backwards hypothetically locate a point of common origin, and hence, of course, a universal law behind evolution, in which the processes of reincarnation must be found, as well as a widely accepted scientific doctrine that matter and consciousness, substance and the states summed up under thought, will, and feeling are not separate or are manifestations of the basic mode of existence. Existence constitutes the objective and subjective sides of substance. We vainly endeavor to separate spirit and matter. They are simply opposite phases of one single root. Overlooked by materialism is a very obvious fact in nature that substance of one kind or another exists in forms not yet analyzable by the microscope or test tube, or observable by their effects on the material world. The source of things can be neither matter nor consciousness as we understand them. In our ordinary experience, both continue seemingly different. It is instead that which differs as much from both matter and consciousness, themselves known only by contrast with each other, as oxygen and hydrogen differ from the water which they form when in complete union. To be traced back to such a source, matter and consciousness have to be analyzed into far simpler and more primitive forms. Matter has been analyzed successively into molecule, atom, electron, proton, neutron, and other breakdowns. With the increasing simplification of matter, there has been a continuous approach to its unity with other forms of existence. We have learned that the dividing line between electricity and substance is nebulous. It shifts constantly back and forth in the scientific books, and no conclusion is yet reached as to whether the quantum is matter or energy, or, for that matter, which the proton is. Einstein and others have concluded that some matter is converted into energy by every chemical reaction in the proportion of about 1 part in 6 billion. In the stars, it is suspected that the transformation is great. Necessarily, it follows that energy under some condition is converted into matter. This is generally accepted. There is the contention in science that matter is in fact imprisoned or crystallized in light. This contention links to a very old doctrine locked up in the doctrine of our friend reincarnation. On the other hand, Einstein has brought magnetism and gravitation under one formula in his unified field theory. He has converted space into time, and in turn converted space-time into a form of energy, that is gravitation. So scientists seem to be in accord with the entirety of physical existence being a unity variously manifesting under different powers. But despite all this evidence, judging by outward appearances, like no two things being identical in structure, the ordinary man quite naturally concludes that all things are separate and different. Since all matter is constantly undergoing change, the likelihood of any beings following the same path of development seems small. But then animals cannot exist without earth to walk on, air to breathe, plants to live among and eat. Plants cannot exist without the mineral kingdom, and the fiery sun is critical as well. Human beings depend on all the kingdoms. A small disturbance in the balance of nature can bring hordes of insects to cover a great area in only a few days. The air can be made unfit to breathe, or the climate can change so as to destroy plant and animal life. A similar natural balance exists between the life of thinking man here and his life in other realms beyond the physical. Realms which bind all together by ties invisible to us on this plane. These invisible ties must be far more real and lasting than many that are visible. As they become visible, the seeming separateness would better explain the laws of life. But even the invisible ties of an electric and magnetic nature must have their root in something higher. The many must come from the one, striving ever to act as the one in spite of outward differences. By the laws of analogy, the microcosmic man must be a miniature of a greater man. The whole of humanity is as one man, each individual making and sharing the karma of the whole. All beings in all worlds make a still larger unity. The tiniest vibrations set up by each individual are felt throughout the whole universe. From this point of view, the universal man, or oversoul, sustains and supports all lesser souls. For it emanate all worlds and systems of worlds, all creatures and beings of every conceivable grade. Every soul is verily one with Alaya, the oversoul. Yet, as HPB remarks in today's reading from the Voice of the Silence, alas, that so few men should profit by the gift, the priceless boon of learning truth, the right perception of existing things, the knowledge of non-existent I. It is thus that Alaya fails to reach the heart of all. So how can realization of this truth, of the identity of the many within the one, be attained? It can come only by seeking within for the answer, by opening our hearts, by learning to discern the ever-fleeting from the everlasting. Looking without leads only to confusion and a maze of particulars. Many have been the men of great intellect caught in this maze, unable to find their way because they fail to free their hearts of selfishness. We all have that tendency we have to fight. Once the heart is made pure, the mind can be cleared of all its useless lumber. Ignorance consists in false ideas, all springing from a false idea of self. Once this is cleared away, the path of learning becomes unobstructed. But before Alaya can reach the heart, pride must go. A subtle pride can throw back great beings on the brink of realization. Any preference for the individual self to the self of all prevents emergence with that self which in its soul aspect is alaya. After liberation must come renunciation. Renunciation for all souls who would keep their acquired divinity. By giving up reward, it becomes possible for others in future ages to do likewise. Without those who renounce nirvanic bliss, this universe would be a cosmic failure. Greatest of all souls are those who live for the sake of others, for, quote, suffering fellow men, unquote. Ralph Waldo Emerson, in addressing the Oversoul, wrote that the supreme critic on the errors of the past and the present, and the only prophet of that which must be, is that great nature in which we rest, as the earth lies in the soft arms of the atmosphere. That unity, that Oversoul, within which every man's particular being is contained and made one with all other. That commitment, that common heart of which all sincere conversation is the worship, to which all right action is submission, that overpowering reality which confutes our tricks and talents and constrains everyone to pass for what he is, and to speak from his character and not from the tone, in which evermore tends to pass into our thought and hand and become wisdom and virtue and power and beauty. We'll stop it here. There's plenty more information. This is a complete process, at least a complete framework of a process of becoming selfless and of what we should be doing while we're embodied. And it also talks about our times when we're not embodied too. So I could stop it here and entertain any questions. Yes.
By the title One Life, One Oversoul, One Source, I think that there was ever a time where we were that, but was that a time when there was no separation of the sexes in other realms? Because what I see today, our societies tend to individualize the person, where all have to thrive, but for not selfish reasons only, but for survival, things like that. But we don't tend to think as like others are part of oneself. We think of ourselves a lot. In comparing the human race to the other kingdom, for example, the animal kingdom, there are many examples that the animal kingdom acts like if they were one. Of course, there are loners too, but do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think you just summarized this talk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is what I understand what you said. Yes, it's over and over again. This says there's one. Yeah. We see it as more than one. Because we see it through the eyes of our material existence. Yeah. And that's why it appears so separate. Mm-hmm. But it's not. It's all under this umbrella. And with respect to who we are, it's said over and over again thou art that. We don't see ourselves as that. I mean, in fact, there's some parts of religion, if you will. If you stand up and say, I'm God, I mean, you just could be thrown out of the place. But if you really mean, I am God in essence, then that is correct. That's who we are. We just have masqueraded this thing so much until we don't see that on a day-to-day basis. There's so many distractions around us that we need to very frequently go to that quiet corner and look into ourselves as to who we really are, and how we can make that apparent in our daily lives.
When we were thrown into the material world as individuals, thinking humans, was that a test for the human race? Okay, here you have your individuality, but find a way to get back to the source and become one again. Do you see it that way?
That is part. I think you're talking about the master plan here, the way I understand it anyway.
Yeah, because
one it comes down, if we can kind of just overall. So the one shoots down. Okay, I'm not going to erase anything.
Okay.
You can take a picture later.
Okay.
The first logos, if you will, that's the master plan, if you want to think about it in terms of what we can understand. Shoots out a spark. Everything is in that spark. All the existence, that's the start of the manvantara we talked about earlier. Every manvantara, that spark goes out from the first logos, goes into a second logos. And this logos really, we start seeing material, if you will. But we don't get to the material phase really until logos 3. Okay, that is when we have the Christ who is embodied, we have the perfected beings, and we have us there too. They're our older brothers. We have us trying to make our way through to this. Then we have the circle of necessity, where we start, our journey. Every individuality starts the journey, the highest level. Okay. Now, the student doesn't know exactly where to put our highest level, but it's somewhere around here. We go down from the spiritual, okay? We're spiritual beings coming down into material. We get into the material phase, and we lose our spirituality. Our spirituality, if we will, goes into the background, and we only basically see material when we get way down here, and then we finally come back out, up towards spirituality. It's said that we're about right here now in our overall development. That doesn't mean every individual is there. Some are further along, some are further behind. But that's kind of where it's at. We come through from the purely spiritual, and there's a whole host of beings that help make us who we are, the Dain Chohans and so forth. So we come down in the material, we take on a material body somewhere or another, but not in human form, until we go through this experience of the mineral, the next thing, plant, and then the animal phase, all the various animals. If you think about the statement here, we go through all those phases. I mean, you got to think about that. That takes eons of time. There's all kinds of animals out there. And it doesn't mean that we have ever been that animal, but we get that experience, okay? And going down into this, okay? And then our purpose for being here is to lift everything up around us, including ourselves. So we're down here into this mire right now. You know, we do have it. You know, we have this right and wrong, trying to figure out how to deal with things around us, and I think virtually all of us want to make things better, but we don't really know how. So we're out here trying to do it, making mistakes and so forth. But that's the system propels us by natural impulse, by natural impulse, to get down to here, to the human level, wherever that is down on this little circle here. Once we get to that human level, then we have to advance through self-induced and self-devised efforts all the way back up to this chain of events, all the way back up to where we came from, and that's, you might think of that as a mantra, or maybe even it might take longer than a mantra. I don't know. Depends on the individual efforts.
Yeah, that's the thing that astonishes me more when you say individual efforts, self-induced, self-devised efforts. But then we are like getting ourselves further than being one with our peers. Do we have to be just one with the one source?
Come and be ye separate, it says.
Yeah, but how about our peers?
Well, it doesn't mean...
The human race, don't we have to first acquire that sense that we're part of the human race and act like we care about others as if others were ourselves?
Come and be ye separate doesn't mean you go out in the woods and you just you divorce yourself from what's going on around you. That's the problem we have, is we need to be in the middle of what's happening.
But that word individual and what it entails, I have a problem understanding how can we overcome that. And
that is a problem, because when we start out, we're one with the all, right? We're one with everything. That's this high spiritual level.
The individual effort.
And then we break away into all of these zillions of things. Our individuality. Then we have an individuality. It's, Atma Buddhi Manas. We study that all the time. That's our individuality. Okay, and then we have what we need for our existence in the world, which is, passions and desires and all that. This is permanent. This is impermanent. That falls off at the end of a single lifetime. But it still influences everything around us in ways that we might not realize. But the point is, what you're trying to make is, we definitely are here for a purpose, and our purpose is to try to uplift everything around us. But we can't do that unless we go out there and participate.
There you go. Because the individual, I have a problem understanding individual.
There's no such thing, really.
There's no such thing.
No.
Because if we think individual, it's just me. And another thing that...
The only thing we think, it says, come and be ye separate, which means... like Jesus was tempted to say, to do something, and he just stayed quiet.
Oh.
He separated himself from that. I believe that's would be an illustration of being separate. He was in the world, but he was not of the world.
Yeah, and when you mention go to your quiet corner and think about your essence, and also I'm thinking people who tend to be loners or have a spiritual life, they tend to be like very separate from society's organization or whatever, or people who meditate, who live in caves, things like that, the extremes.
Yeah. Well,
the
Buddha did that.
Yeah,
he did that until
purpose, to teach.
Sometimes you have to go out and get, meditate or be out for years, if you will, getting to understand some of the stuff.
Yes.
But he appeared back.
Yeah. Same
When
with
he understood it, he came back to help.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not a bad thing to isolate oneself, but then think that you're part of the many.
Temporary isolation
temporary.
to try to understand stuff is different than deciding I don't want to deal with these people, you know, and you know that is I think what you're trying to get at, or what you're getting at there with your question, is one that we have to, I think, ponder and decide on our own in a quiet space, but then go out tomorrow and try to get things done again, because we have families, we have countries, you know, communities and all that to deal with.
Yeah.
Nothing happens in a vacuum, if you will. We have to give it our best shot every day, and the only way we can do that is through this combination of things. Of course, meditation is an important part of the process, in going to that quiet corner and thinking through some of the things that happen during the day, and how to approach those things in a better way.
Can you please explain again the primordial force, centripetal, centrifugal? How does that help the individual to get back to the one oversoul?
These are essentially competing forces, right? I mean, the centripetal or centrifugal is going to go pushing inward, pushing outward. How does that help you get back to?
Yeah.
Well, you have to, I mean, the Buddha said that, the middle way.
Okay, yeah.
So we have to balance those competing forces as we go through all this. Again, easier said than done. But he you know, his example managed to do that. Well, he was able to, and you see the Dalai Lama sometimes. It was interesting to watch him with school children, you know, tabling questions, you know, answering questions and so forth, and thinking through all the questions, and then coming up with an answer, and sometimes not everything they wanted to hear, but it was very, very well thought out. And, you know, it was nice and a good experience to watch him in action. You know. Well, as I said, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg this morning, and I would hope that would cause folks to delve more into this process that's laid out here in the books. This is brought out by H.P. Blavatsky, of course, and the Masters of Wisdom. She never took credit for anything in here. She said she was simply being a recorder. She went to Tibet, where, you know, I guess there were more masters there than anywhere else in the world. But we never know when we're associated with a master, because especially in the West, they won't tell us because we tend to kill them. So you know, our neighbor could be. So we have to be ourselves. We are ourselves. This is thou art that. From that innermost part of our being, that's who we are right here. That triangle. We just have to bring it out, and that's a challenge that we face every day as we move along. And more, you know, we're embodied, we get our experiences, that's where we do our learning, and then we're not embodied, and that's where we assimilate what we have learned while we're embodied, and we come back out and do it again, and we do that, I don't know how many times, many times in the process, until we learn how to become one again. That individuality we talked about here, that's Atma Buddhi Manas in Sanskrit terms. And the individuality is like here, working with these two right here, getting those in balance, if you will. Once you are in balance, then you're at your highest level up there, with one with the all. And you choose it somewhere along the way, and that's inferred in this talk today. Once we become perfected, if you will, Dharmanakaya, I think it's called, then we get to make decisions. Do we want to just go out and not come back to humanity anymore and do whatever they do at that level? Do we want to come back like the Buddha did and help humanity's cause? No, they can't take away our karma. This thing of forgiveness of sins, forget about that. They can't take away our karma, but they can help us in terms of helping us, helping control the karma we get in a particular time. They might be, doing that role, but they say that we have to face our own whatever we do. So that's the way it works. That's what this dude doesn't know a lot of this stuff. He's running like everybody else. Well, that's what the literature here says. It's a lifetime's of effort to understand why we're here and to answer the questions that you ask, really. And being thou art that at all times. So, thank you for going. Did you have?
No, I just wanted to add that the law of reincarnation is intertwined with another law that's never. It's not a law, but it's responsibility.
Exactly.
Once you understand these laws, how they work, it's your responsibility to correct things.
That
You're
old
not going to erase.
Helps us learn that law too.
Yeah, you, like you say, you're not going to take away, erase past deeds and their outcomes, but it's your responsibility to change course and do the right thing.
Absolutely.
Responsibility is a big thing. That's why I am attracted to this literature. Once I understood that I was responsible, not a higher being responsible for me. I make my decisions, and then if I err, I have to face consequences.
Yeah, that higher being.
And learn from those errors.
That higher being we think of is through every fiber, and that's who we are, and that's who we in this world of materialism really don't see. We gotta dig it out. Thank you for joining us today, and hope to see you again next week. And let's see, I think I'm answering on what it is. The purpose and benefits of meditation.